The 19th century belonged to steam, the force that drove the industrial world. Yet on the high seas, the age of steam was still an era of compromise defined by noise, vibration, and inherent inefficiency. Great naval powers relied on massive reciprocating piston engines, machines of cumbersome power that shook the hulls and wasted vast amounts of precious energy. Naval supremacy was defined by these limitations. And then, in a single audacious moment, everything changed. The year was 1897. The Royal Navy's elite were assembled at the Spithead Fleet Review, a magnificent display of maritime strength. They watched their iron-clad ships churning along, their speed constrained by the rhythmic shudder of their massive engines. Suddenly, a blur appeared on the horizon. A tiny, 100-foot experimental vessel tore through the review lines, moving at a speed the Admiralty had dismissed as impossible. 34 knots. The vessel was the Turbinia, and its performance that day was more than a spectacle. It was the abrupt introduction of a new strategic reality. The Turbinia had completely outpaced the fastest warships of the Royal Navy. Its secret lay in an invention born 13 years earlier: the modern steam turbine. The inventor, Sir Charles Parsons, had devised a radical machine that converted pressurized steam into continuous rotational power through staged, spinning blades. This eliminated the wasteful stop-start cycles of the piston engine, delivering smooth, uninterrupted, and potent speed. The Admiralty witnessed not just speed, but a mechanical transformation. This technology would empower the British Navy across 2 world wars, enabling faster maneuvers and reliable performance under combat stress, though its adoption would come with significant strategic costs and complex engineering challenges. The era of the slow, shaking engine was over. Charles Algernon Parsons was born in 1854, the son of a pioneering astronomer who constructed the Leviathan of Parsonstown, the largest telescope in the world at the time. This environment instilled in young Charles a profound passion for precision engineering and the continuous elimination of error. Parsons carried that passion through his education at Trinity College, Dublin and Cambridge. His early career focused on electricity generation, and it was while observing dynamos powered by the inefficient, violent reciprocating engines of the day that he recognized the fundamental problem. Parsons was determined to harness the relentless pressure of steam into a continuous, perfectly efficient motion. His design was a marvel of mechanical simplicity and engineering complexity. High-pressure steam was expanded through a series of multi-stage blades, capturing the energy in a smooth, rotating action. Years later, reflecting on his design philosophy, in his 1911 Reday lecture, Parsons stated, "It seemed to me that moderate surface velocities and speeds of rotation were essential if the turbine motor was to receive general acceptance as a prime mover. I therefore decided to split up the fall in pressure of the steam into small fractional expansions over a large number of turbines in series, so that the velocity of the steam nowhere should be great. I was also anxious to avoid the well-known cutting action on metal of steam at high velocity." The turbine offered revolutionary benefits: a significant reduction in fuel consumption and an almost total elimination of the vibrations that plagued earlier marine power plants. Initial resistance was high, primarily because the turbine's optimal speed was far too high for ship propellers, risking the formation of vapor bubbles that reduce thrust and cause rapid erosion. Parsons overcame this by using 3 turbines on the Turbinia, driving 3 separate propeller shafts. By 1900, his designs offered speed increases of 15% to 20% and vastly extended operational ranges. These factors, extended range and reliability, were the strategic attributes that would directly enable the Royal Navy's global deployments. Despite the dazzling speed of the Turbinia, the Royal Navy's initial adoption was cautious. The technology was radical and expensive, requiring entirely new metallurgy and manufacturing precision. However, the international arms race made the speed advantage irresistible. In 1899, the Admiralty commissioned the first turbine-powered destroyers, HMS Viper and HMS Cobra, capable of achieving an astonishing 37 knots. The numbers confirmed the future of naval propulsion. The turbine's ascent culminated in 1906 with the launch of HMS Dreadnought. This battleship was the physical embodiment of a technological leap, the first all-big-gun warship, and crucially, powered entirely by Parsons' direct-drive steam turbines. The Dreadnought achieved 21 knots, a speed its contemporaries could not match, instantly rendering every other battleship obsolete. This single vessel intensified the Anglo-German naval arms race. The German response, the Nassau-class battleships launched in 1908, utilized turbine propulsion but were slower at 20 knots, forcing Berlin to escalate naval budgets and competition dramatically to regain parity. The economic factor was paramount. Admiralty reports noted the high initial construction costs of turbine plants, but justified them based on projected fuel savings, estimated at 20% less coal or oil than equivalent reciprocating engines. Furthermore, Parsons, having regained control of his critical patents in 1894 after disputes, began global licensing. This spread the technology rapidly to rivals, including US firms like Curtiss, diluting Britain's exclusivity, but establishing the turbine as the universally accepted prime mover. The new engine was not just for warships. Early merchant adoption, such as the transatlantic liner RMS Victorian, showcased the smooth efficiency that would prove vital for maintaining wartime convoy logistics. By the time the Great War erupted in 1914, the Parsons turbine powered most major vessels in the Royal Navy, providing the speed and, critically, the reliability needed for massive fleet actions. By 1914, the Parsons turbine was the naval standard. Its strategic performance was measured not just in top speed, but in operational reliability and endurance. The turbine's design eliminated the immense racking vibration of piston engines, minimizing wear and tear. This meant less time in dock for repairs and greater time on station, a crucial factor for the Grand Fleet's mission to enforce the North Sea blockade. Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, praised the technology, noting that the turbines enabled the Grand Fleet's unceasing vigil, highlighting its indispensable role in the long-term blockade endurance. The ultimate test came in 1916 at the Battle of Jutland, the only full-scale clash of dreadnoughts. This was a maelstrom of steel and smoke. Shells the size of small cars rained down, turning the North Sea into a boiling, metallic cauldron. In this chaos, speed became the key to tactical survival. The British battle line, powered entirely by Parsons turbines, did not shudder or hesitate. They could maintain a blistering 25 to 28 knots, not just in a straight line, but through violent, sustained manoeuvring under continuous fire. Deep below the decks, however, there was no glory, only punishing work. In the vast, throbbing engine rooms, the turbine crews, known simply as stokers and engineers, fought their own battle. Surrounded by superheated steam and the deafening high-pitched whine of the rotating machinery, they pushed the boilers past their red line limits. The temperature could exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Their job was not just to maintain the speed, but to ensure the delicate turbine blades and precision reduction gearing did not seize under the immense stress of continuous maximum output. The reliability of Parsons' design was a testament to their endurance and technical precision under unimaginable combat pressure. This consistent, reliable power delivery allowed Admiral Sir John Jellicoe to execute a decisive, high-speed deployment that led to the critical manoeuvre known as crossing the T, positioning the British column perpendicularly to the German column for a broadside advantage. This fleet-wide manoeuvre, achieved at speed, would have been impossible with the older, unreliable reciprocating machinery. The sheer readiness of the fleet, enabled by Parsons' work, was noted by Jellicoe himself. The Grand Fleet could turn the scale of the war in an afternoon. Naval reports confirm that the turbine's consistent performance reduced repair downtime by an average of 30% compared to older ships, enabling the fleet to remain at sea for over 2,000 days while enforcing the blockade. This relentless efficiency created significant strategic frustration for the Germans. Admiral Reinhard Scheer, commander of the German High Seas Fleet, later reflected in his memoir that the high speed maintained by the British ships was crucial in allowing them to dictate the terms of engagement, evade entrapment, and often compel a German retreat. Beyond the great fleet actions, turbine speed proved tactically indispensable in specialized operations. For instance, in the daring Zeebrugge raid in 1918, high-speed turbine-powered destroyers were critical for laying smoke screens and covering the rapid approach and withdrawal of the block ships during the precise, time-sensitive assault on the German U-boat base. However, the initial direct-drive turbines were not without their flaws. The very nature of their high-speed design meant that during extended patrols at low cruising speeds they were wildly inefficient, consuming excessive fuel. This early fuel inefficiency often resulted in fuel shortages for squadrons on long, distant patrols, forcing early returns to port and foreshadowing the necessity of the geared turbine refinements that would dominate the interwar period. The Germans retreated at Jutland and never again seriously challenged the supremacy of the British Grand Fleet. The experience of World War I proved the turbine's speed but highlighted a technical limitation: efficiency at low speeds. The solution, which defined the interwar period, was the geared turbine. Parsons' engineers perfected the double reduction gearing system, a precision-cut gearbox that mechanically separated the high-speed turbine from the slow-turning propeller. The turbine could now spin at its most efficient rate, up to 3,000 revolutions per minute, while the propeller spun at its optimal speed, around 300 revolutions per minute. The initial introduction of this system in destroyers like HMS Badger was followed by rapid refinement throughout the 1920s. This technical achievement had profound strategic and economic implications. Fuel consumption plummeted, granting naval vessels vastly extended operational ranges. This was critical during the post-World War I era, where the Washington Naval Treaty imposed severe restrictions on warship building. With tonnage limited, naval architects were forced to focus on efficiency. Parsons' company, which had supplied over 10 million shaft horsepower during World War I, adapted by developing high-pressure, high-temperature steam systems to further squeeze efficiency. The result was ships like the County-class cruisers, which achieved ranges exceeding 8,000 nautical miles, a vast improvement in global reach. An assessment by the Institution of Mechanical Engineers noted that gearing was responsible for extending endurance by 20 to 30% across the board. The downside, however, was technical conservatism. Naval engineer Louis Le Bailly later described the resulting Royal Navy turbine plants as reliable but conservative compared to higher pressure, lighter American designs, noting this technical conservatism was partly a result of the interwar slump's impact on innovation and the scarcity of highly skilled labor available to risk new, complex designs. The Second World War tested the turbine's endurance across global theaters, from the frigid Arctic to the tropical Pacific. The refinement of the geared turbine was now the mechanical foundation for Britain's survival, crucial for maintaining the supply lines across the Atlantic. The Tribal-class destroyers, the spearhead of the Royal Navy's anti-submarine efforts, were powered by geared turbines generating up to 44,000 shaft horsepower. This massive power translated to a top speed of 36 knots. This speed on demand, coupled with the improved endurance, was vital for anti-submarine warfare, allowing destroyers to rapidly run down surfaced U-boats. The operational tempo was immense, destroyers in crucial convoy groups like convoy HX-300, the largest of the war, logged over 100,000 miles per ship. But the ultimate drama unfolded in May 1941. Following the swift, brutal sinking of HMS Hood, the pursuit of the German battleship Bismarck became an all-consuming mission for the Admiralty. The challenge was not just to find the ship, but to hold contact and close the distance across 900 miles of violent North Atlantic seas. This was the turbine's finest hour. The pursuit demanded unrelenting speed and endurance. Flagship HMS King George V and her escorts utilized their geared turbine plants to push maximum output, generating approximately 110,000 shaft horsepower, hour after hour, day after day. In the deafening engine rooms, the turbine's continuous rotation was the heartbeat of the chase. Engineers worked at the limits of the machinery, feeding high-pressure steam into the blades, knowing that a single mechanical failure would mean losing the prize and sacrificing strategic victory. This sustained velocity was impossible for any engine of the previous era. Reciprocating pistons would have seized or broken down under such continuous strain. The turbine, however, absorbed the punishment. After days of high-speed steaming in brutal weather, the British fleet finally closed the gap. The victory was secured not just by firepower but by the fundamental mechanical fact that the British engines held up under this unrelenting stress while the Bismarck's own propulsion system had been damaged and compromised. The speed gifted by Parsons delivered the killing blow. Beyond the Atlantic, the turbine's versatility was crucial in other theatres. In the Mediterranean, speed enabled surprise attacks. The turbine-driven ships of Force H, including the carrier HMS Ark Royal, used their pace to execute the 1940 Taranto raid, proving the value of fast carrier-based strikes. In the Pacific, turbine-powered carriers like HMS Illustrious were able to support the challenging Okinawa operations, enduring long transits and high-intensity flying operations. Overall, the consistent reliability provided by the turbine design ensured that the Royal Navy maintained an operational readiness rate of over 80% for its 900-plus warships, a statistic vital to the war effort. This technical superiority was consistently proven across diverse tactical situations. In World War I, the speed and low vibration provided by the turbine were vital for the high-speed maneuvers at Jutland, but also in other campaigns. During the challenging Dardanelles campaign in 1915, while the overall operation failed, the ability of turbine-powered destroyers to make quick maneuvers and sustained high-speed runs during evacuations was critical for minimizing casualties and saving lives. The turbine's performance continued to be tested in the extremes of World War II. In the Battle of the Barents Sea 1942, turbine-powered destroyers like HMS Onslow repelled superior German raiders. The destroyers used their high-speed capability in the freezing Arctic conditions to lay smoke screens and evade fire, demonstrating that the engine's power was a tactical shield as much as a weapon. However, the pursuit of efficiency and speed came with its own risks. The complexity of the geared turbine plants, while robust, meant that maintenance at sea was difficult, and occasional failures did occur. For instance, the high-speed maneuvers and intense use led to occasional mechanical issues, such as those that plagued the turbine reduction gearing on HMS Prince of Wales in 1941, illustrating the difficult balance between performance and absolute reliability required for complex war machinery. Despite these isolated drawbacks, the turbine's overall operational resilience was the key differentiator. It allowed the British to maintain tactical control, forcing the enemy to react to the superior speed and maneuverability of their fleet. Sir Charles Parsons died in 1931, well before the true existential test of his life's work. Yet the story of his invention is incomplete without acknowledging the men who tended it, the engineers, stokers, and engine room staff. The turbine was quieter, smoother, and vastly more powerful than the piston engine, but operating it demanded a new level of precision. In the heat and deafening roar of the turbine chamber, engineers monitored the precise pressure, temperature, and flow of superheated steam, often near 700 degrees Fahrenheit, in confined spaces. Their commitment to the steady, smooth functioning of the turbine reflected Parsons' own passion for order and precision. The technical demands of the war effort placed incredible strain on these crews. Veteran accounts detail the constant fight against feed pump failures and the need to manage high-pressure steam systems under combat stress. They had to maintain precision machinery under fire, ensuring the complex gearing remained lubricated and balanced, making them the ultimate human guarantors of the fleet's propulsive advantage. The turbine's strategic value was often illustrated in unique ways. In March 1915, HMS Dreadnought, powered by Parsons' direct-drive turbines, detected a German submarine, the U-29, surfaced in front of it. The great battleship, designed to fight other battleships, was able to execute a sudden, aggressive turn that allowed it to ram and sink the submarine, the only time a battleship achieved this feat in history. The strategic legacy of Parsons' invention is clear. It solved the problems of attrition and range that had historically limited naval dominance. The engine was a force multiplier, ensuring that the Royal Navy could deploy globally and sustain its operations with efficiency and confidence. Furthermore, Parsons' influence extended beyond the war. His continuous flow principles laid the essential groundwork for nuclear propulsion in submarines. On the social front, his wife, Lady Catherine Parsons, continued his legacy by helping to found the Women's Engineering Society in 1919, ensuring the expertise honed during the war was utilized in peacetime innovation. Although C.A. Parsons and Company eventually became part of Siemens, the core design remains the fundamental basis of steam turbine power worldwide. The steam turbine stands as one of the most significant mechanical inventions of the industrial age. It provided the most efficient means yet devised to convert thermal energy into large-scale, continuous motion. The story of the Parsons turbine is the story of how an obsession with efficiency translated into a profound naval advantage that helped secure Britain's place as a supreme naval power in the 20th century. The legacy of Sir Charles Parsons extends far beyond the oceans. His fundamental work on compressing and expanding fluids through staged blades directly inspired pioneers like Frank Whittle in the 1930s, who developed the jet engine based on the continuous flow gas turbine concept. Today, the direct legacy of the turbine is twofold: in energy and naval power. More than 80% of global electricity generation relies on steam and gas turbines built upon his original blueprint. Even modern surface combatants, such as the US Navy's Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and the Royal Navy's own HMS Queen Elizabeth-class carriers, utilize sophisticated gas turbines for their primary propulsion, proving the enduring strategic value of the rotational engine. From the Grand Fleet to the modern power grid, Parsons' obsession with converting kinetic energy into useful work transformed society. His life's work perfectly embodied his philosophy: the object of all invention should be the elimination of waste. This ethos resonates today not only in mechanical efficiency, but in the global drive for sustainability, where maximizing energy output from available resources is paramount. As one engineer recently observed, Parsons gave us the tool to manage power on a massive scale. His turbine is the grandfather of the modern world's energy backbone. The conflict for global supremacy was won, in part, by the turbine's reliable, high-speed horsepower, which was essential alongside other factors like radar and code breaking. It was the mechanical underpinning of command of the seas, a force that ensured the British Navy could fight when they liked, where they liked, and how they liked. Parsons' invention was the unsung hero of the seas, ensuring that the unyielding efficiency and speed of the Royal Navy were available when needed most. the fate of the empire was ultimately secured by the smooth, unwavering and factually precise revolutions of a wheel of steam. The year is 1941. Europe is an inferno. Britain stands virtually alone, her lifelines stretched across the vast Arctic arena of the Atlantic Ocean. It is here, in these grey, churning waters, that the fate of two empires would be decided, not by men in trenches, but by monoliths of steel. These were the ultimate machines of war, built to project unparalleled power across the globe. In the spring of 1941, two steel behemoths were destined to collide in a duel that shook the world. Their meeting would be devastating. One would fall in flames, igniting a chase for retaliation that became legend. This is the story of the hunt for vengeance. She was known simply as the Mighty Hood. For decades, she had stood as the unquestioned symbol of British naval supremacy, the majestic embodiment of empire. Launched in 1918, the battle cruiser Hood was, for 20 years, the largest warship in the world. Her sheer scale, her imposing 15-inch guns, and her flawless record had cloaked her in a national myth. To the British public, the Hood was Britain's shield, a visible, resilient declaration of power. To serve on her was the highest honour. Beneath the polished brass and the imposing steel was a crew of 1,418 men, ranging from seasoned veterans to young boys. For the average sailor, life aboard was a complex, choreographed routine. They trained incessantly for battle, loading her massive 1,900-pound shells, practicing complex damage control drills, and standing watch in the biting wind. The atmosphere was a continuous cycle of high-pressure work and confined living. A day in the life of a Hood rating was a blend of relentless efficiency and profound anticipation. They practiced the vital torpedo defense exercises, trained their anti-aircraft guns, and meticulously maintained her massive engines, which could push the 48,000-ton ship to 28 knots. Their faith in her, based on 2 decades of service, was absolute. They felt secure. They sailed on a living legend. But the Hood's aging grace masked a deadly flaw. Built on an older design, her horizontal armour plating was dangerously thin, especially around the ammunition magazines. The Admiralty knew that modern, high-trajectory plunging shells posed a fatal risk. While she stood ready to deter the enemy, destiny had already marked her as a hero doomed by a critical design vulnerability. Across the North Sea, a modern menace was rising. If the Hood was the aging heroine, the German battleship Bismarck was the arrogant new opponent. Constructed in secret at the Hamburg shipyards, she was Hitler's terrifying answer to British dominance. The Bismarck was a triumph of engineering. At 50,000 tons, she was heavier, newer, and technologically superior to the Hood. She boasted advanced radar systems and a sophisticated multi-layered armour scheme designed to resist most conventional attacks. She was described in Nazi propaganda as invincible, a dangerous myth history would soon reveal. Under the command of Admiral Günther Lutyens, the German crew's morale was high. Lutyens himself, however, harboured deep misgivings about the mission's feasibility and his own isolation in the vast ocean. His private log entries hint at a grim fatalism, a knowledge that this voyage might be a one-way trip, a dark counterpoint to the crew's public confidence. His crew, a mix of zealous enthusiasts and conscripts, saw themselves as the modern predator, sent to challenge the backbone of the Allied war effort. The reason for this ultimate naval deployment lay in the desperate battle for the Atlantic. The Allied convoys, packed with food, fuel, and arms from North America, were Britain's lifeline. Without them, the nation would face starvation. For months, German U-boats had waged the brutal happy time, sinking Allied merchant vessels at crippling rates. Over 350,000 tons were lost in the first months of 1941 alone. But a surface raider of the Bismarck's size, capable of destroying an entire convoy in hours, represented an existential threat that no single naval escort could handle. The Operation Rheinübung began on May 19, 1941. As the Bismarck slipped into the vast ocean, British intelligence scrambled. The tireless work of code breakers at Bletchley Park, a collective of brilliant minds, provided crucial early warnings. The Ultra intercepts gave the home fleet their one chance to intercept the German monolith. Churchill's Admiralty knew the stakes could not be higher. And so, the steel giants were destined to meet in the Denmark Strait. 2 ships, 2 nations, 2 crews, on a collision course where one devastating salvo would begin a chase for retaliation that would shake the world. The German sortie, Operation Rheinübung, was tracked from the start. Admiral John Tovey reacted with immediate urgency, dispatching the mythic Hood and the new battleship Prince of Wales. Their mission was existential: intercept the German predators before they could sever Britain's vital lifeline. For the crews, the hunt was a blend of high excitement and mounting fear. They knew they were steaming toward the first true battle between the war's leviathans. As the ships carved their way through the Arctic mist of the Denmark Strait, the air was thick with anticipation, the metallic scent of oil and the constant thrum of massive engines. In the pre-dawn gloom of May 24, 1941, the moment arrived. At 5:45 a.m., the Hood and Prince of Wales made visual contact with the German duo. The distance was approximately 25,000 yards. The Hood's commander, Vice Admiral Lancelot Holland, chose to close the distance rapidly. His tactical decision was aggressive, but fatally flawed. By charging directly toward the enemy, he severely limited the number of guns the British ships could bring to bear, while simultaneously exposing the Hood's critical weakness. Her thin deck armour was acutely vulnerable to the enemy's high trajectory, plunging fire. At 5:52 a.m., the Hood opened fire first, marking the beginning of the end. The massive ship shuddered with the force of her 15-inch guns. But in the haste and fog, the British misidentified their targets, wasting crucial moments firing on the escort, Prince Eugen. The Germans, however, made no such mistake. They concentrated their immense firepower on the legendary target. At 5:55 a.m., the Bismarck returned fire. The ships traded blows, closing the gap rapidly to approximately 14,000 yards. The Bismarck's guns, firing with unnerving precision, sent enormous geysers of water onto the Hood's decks. The sound of the incoming shells was a visceral warning the crew could not ignore. Then, at precisely 6 a.m., it happened. The Bismarck's 5th salvo found its mark. The shell, fired from miles away, arced high over the freezing water and penetrated the relatively thin deck armour of the battlecruiser, plunging deep into the Hood's aft magazine. The resulting explosion was swift and devastating. It was not a conventional explosion, but the total annihilation of steel and flesh, a thunderous concussion that ripped the mighty Hood completely in two. A colossal column of flame and smoke, hundreds of feet high, erased Britain's symbol of naval supremacy from the sea. The forward section, briefly visible, rose vertically before plunging rapidly into the Atlantic, gone in minutes. Of the 1,418 men aboard, only 3 survived. One of them, ordinary seaman Ted Briggs, who was on the compass platform, recalled the moment of impact and explosion as a huge sheet of flame. Thrown into the Arctic water, he spent 3 agonizing hours clinging to a piece of debris, a bewildered, traumatized witness to the utter destruction of a ship everyone believed was resilient. For the few men who survived, the terror of the moment was instantly replaced by the unnatural, hollow silence of the open sea. The Prince of Wales was forced to withdraw under heavy fire, narrowly avoiding collisions with the wreckage. Critically, however, she scored 3 confirmed hits on the Bismarck. One shell caused minor flooding, Another damaged a boiler room, slightly reducing the German ship's speed, and the most vital hit caused flooding in the forecastle, contaminating crucial fuel tanks. This damage, though not immediately disabling, crippled the Bismarck's operational range and forced Admiral Lutyens to seek repairs. The news reached London with the force of a physical blow. The loss of the Hood, the ultimate symbol of British naval pride, was a national humiliation. Winston Churchill was enraged. The message he sent to the Admiralty was short, cold, and absolute, echoing across the command centres. Sink the Bismarck or come home on foot if necessary. The loss of the Hood galvanised the Royal Navy. It was not just a military setback, it felt like a personal tragedy, transforming duty into a desperate, furious retaliation. The sheer emotional weight of vengeance now drove every man in the mobilised armada. With the Hood gone, the hunter had become the hunted. The Royal Navy turned the vast Atlantic into a deadly, inevitable game of cat and mouse. The destruction of the Hood transformed the Royal Navy's directive. The public shame and private fury of the Admiralty triggered an immediate vast military manhunt across the North Atlantic. This was an unprecedented mobilization. 2 battleships, 1 battlecruiser, 2 aircraft carriers, 10 cruisers, and a swarm of destroyers were all directed toward a single, damaged target. This was not a standard operation. It was a desperate, all-consuming search for retaliation. Admiral Tovey commanded the home fleet reinforcements from his flagship, the colossal battleship King George V. From the south, Force H steamed at high speed out of Gibraltar, led by the aircraft carrier Ark Royal. Aboard the Bismarck, Admiral Lutyens knew he was the target of an entire nation's vengeance. He attempted desperate evasive manoeuvres, briefly achieving radio silence in the hopes of simply vanishing into the vast ocean. For a terrifying 24 hours, the Bismarck disappeared, a haunting ghost of steel. The silence on the British side was maddening. The fear that the monolith would reach the Atlantic trade lanes was suffocating. But Lutyens broke his own operational silence with a long, unnecessary radio transmission intended for German High Command. That single message, meant to assure them of his progress, gave British intelligence the critical bearing they needed. The ultra-intercepts confirmed the German ship's position and her intent to reach Brest for repairs. The British net tightened. Throughout May 24th and 25th, the pursuit was a tense psychological thriller played out in the fog and spray. British planes hunted relentlessly in foul Arctic weather. The first attempt to slow the behemoth came from the aircraft carrier Victorious. Launched in treacherous conditions, her squadron of slow, obsolete swordfish torpedo bombers, nicknamed string bags, pressed their attack. Flying in a maelstrom of sleet and gale-force winds, the pilots pushed their fragile aircraft to the limit. They faced intense anti-aircraft fire and the terrible weather. The results were disheartening. They scored only 1 minor hit amidships. The fierce weather meant many torpedoes missed entirely or failed to arm correctly due to the enormous waves, highlighting the extreme difficulty of attacking a modern, resilient battleship with such aircraft. The chase continued, marked by near misses and rising dread. The Bismarck then executed a brilliant evasive manoeuvre, circling back behind her pursuers, the cruisers Suffolk and Norfolk, and momentarily shaking them off her tail. The metallic tang of fear hung heavy in the air on the British ships. On the German vessel, the psychological toll was mounting. The fuel leak from the Prince of Wales' earlier hit was worsening. Lutyens rerouted the ship toward occupied France, an acknowledgement that their war cruise was effectively over. Crew diaries recovered later spoke of intense homesickness and the terrifying realization that their voyage was a one-way trip. Then, at the point of deepest British despair, came the breakthrough. A British Catalina reconnaissance aircraft, flown by Ensign Leonard Smith of the then-neutral US Navy, spotted her. This crucial sighting, facilitated by shared intelligence, instantly injected hope back into the British pursuit. The hunt was back on, fueled by renewed determination. The chase highlighted the precarious balance of naval technology in 1941. While the Bismarck boasted advanced radar, the British combined technology with sheer human tenacity. The role of the British destroyers under the command of Captain Philip Vian was critical. As the massive capital ships struggled to close the distance, Vian's small, outgunned force performed a heroic and terrifying task. They shadowed the crippled battleship through the darkness and into the heart of a violent storm. It was an act of extreme courage, preventing the German monolith from altering course or slipping away again. Throughout the night of May 26, Vian's destroyers, including the Polish-manned ORP Piorun, maintained contact. The Piorun, driven by a fierce sense of national retaliation against Hitler, sailed dangerously close to the massive German battleship and exchanged a brief but furious volley of fire. Amidst the explosions and spray, the Piorun famously flashed a signal to the Bismarck. "I am a Pole." It was a symbolic, defiant challenge, underscoring that the entire Allied world was now closing in. This smaller force kept the behemoth pinned down, preparing the stage for the final assault. May 26th brought the endgame. The Ark Royal, steaming with Force H, was now within striking distance. Once again, her squadron of fragile swordfish launched into gale-force winds and violent seas. The air inside the cockpits was a cacophony of roaring engines, creaking fuselages, and the loud rattle of rain. These brave air crews knew the odds were against them. Flying dangerously low, they defied the immense anti-aircraft fire from the Bismarck. The attack was delivered in 2 waves, scoring 2 hits. The first hit amidships caused minor internal flooding, but the second, definitive strike delivered the devastating blow. A torpedo struck the Bismarck's stern, exploding near the propellers and permanently jamming the steering mechanism, locking her rudders at 12 degrees to port. The German superweapon, resilient in armour and firepower, was now paralysed, doomed to steam in hopeless circles. Admiral Lutyens understood the absolute finality. His final despairing signal to Hitler read, "Ship unmanoeuvrable. We will fight to the last shell. Long live the Führer." The ghost of the Hood had delivered its final decisive blow. That night became a nightmare for the German crew. They worked desperately in the deafening, flooded stern compartments, attempting vainly to repair the damaged rudder. Isolated and knowing their fate, morale plummeted. Crew diaries reflect the sheer mental and physical exhaustion of battling the waves and the damage. The psychological toll of being a helpless, immobile target in the vast Arctic Ocean was immense. The British ships closed in. Destroyer attacks continued to harass the crippled battleship through the darkness, their movements illuminated by star shells and the violent rhythmic flashes of their own gunfire. Sonar pings echoed across the water, the relentless sound of the closing net. As dawn broke on May 27th, the last act of vengeance was at hand. As the sun broke over the Atlantic on May 27, 1941, the scene was one of terrible finality. The crippled German warship, unable to steer and listing heavily, was a stationary target. Around her gathered the most powerful battleships of the Royal Navy, Rodney and King George V, supported by the heavy cruisers, Norfolk and Dorsetshire. The time for the chase was over. The moment for retaliation had arrived. The British commanders ensured their approach was meticulous. This was not a chaotic brawl, but a controlled execution. They planned to close the distance quickly to utilize their heavy shells' flatter trajectories, maximizing the energy delivered to the Bismarck's side armor, which they knew was her most resilient feature. The final morning assault began at 8:43 a.m. The British ships opened fire, pounding the Bismarck from an initial range of approximately 23,000 yards. The battleship Rodney, in particular, began a merciless, sustained bombardment, firing broadside after broadside. The British gunners, fueled by the memory of the mighty Hood, fired with cold, clinical precision. The noise was deafening, a continuous, shattering roar that enveloped the atmosphere. Shell after shell, over 2,800 in total, slammed into the structure of the Bismarck. In the initial phase of the bombardment, the focus was on the destruction of the Bismarck's firepower. Within the first 40 minutes, her main gun turrets were systematically destroyed. Turrets Anton and Bruno were taken out first, followed shortly by Caesar and Dora. The German ship could no longer fire back. She was utterly silenced, reduced to a helpless hulk facing an overwhelming onslaught. The barrage then shifted to the annihilation of the superstructure, tearing through the command and control centers. The superstructure was annihilated. The ship burned like a towering pyre on the water. Yet in a final display of defiance against the smoke and flames, her colors flew high. The German crew, trapped in this inferno, fought valiantly to control the raging fires, but the ship was structurally wrecked. Below deck, Admiral Lutyens and his remaining officers had issued the order to set scuttling charges, a final, desperate act to ensure the British would not capture their prized behemoth. The ship, though ruined, refused to sink. The final act was completed by the British cruiser Dorsetshire, which closed in and delivered a final volley of torpedoes. At 10:40 a.m., the Bismarck rolled over, capsized, and vanished stern first into the depths of the Atlantic. Approximately 2,100 men were lost. The British ships immediately ceased fire. The intense fury of vengeance gave way instantly to human instinct. Despite the very real and immediate threat of German U-boat attacks in the area, the rescue efforts began. British sailors lowered boats to pick up the German survivors from the oil-slicked Arctic water. The British ships, Dorsetshire and Maori, managed to pull 110 men from the sea before they were forced to abandon the area due to U-boat sightings. Another 5 men were later rescued by German vessels, bringing the total number of survivors to 115. In the chaos of the rescue, a shared respect emerged amid the horror. The immediate switch from mortal enemies to shared victims of the Atlantic's cruelty was immensely powerful. German prisoners of war later recalled the unexpected kindness of their captors. Baron Burkhard von Müllenheim-Rechberg, the highest-ranking survivor, reflected on the immense bravery displayed by both sides, the cold duty of the British, and the unwavering loyalty of the German crew. The Hood was avenged, but the triumph was bittersweet. The sinking of the Bismarck came at an immense human cost, a stark final reminder of the essential futility of war. The sinking of the Bismarck was an unparalleled, immediate victory for the Allies, one that instantly boosted morale across Britain and the free world. It removed an existential threat and fundamentally curtailed the German Navy's ability to conduct large-scale surface raids. The event served as a critical psychological victory for the Allies, demonstrating that even the most powerful, resilient weapons created by the enemy could be defeated. The episode also marked a definitive, irreversible shift in naval warfare. The age of the massive battleship, the mighty surface combatant, was drawing to a close. The fact that the ultimate damage was inflicted by the tiny, fragile swordfish from the carrier Ark Royal proved decisively that naval dominance now belonged to air power. This lesson would shape the future of naval strategy, setting the stage for the dominance of the aircraft carrier in the Pacific and globally. Today, the wrecks of both ships rest far below the surface of the Atlantic. The Hood, broken by the explosion, rests in pieces, a martyr to the cause of the Empire. The Bismarck, remarkably intact after her final descent, lies nearby. They serve as solemn memorials to the thousands of young men lost, testaments to bravery, technology, and strategic mistakes. The lesson remains etched in the steel and the silence, that even the most powerful monoliths created by man are fragile against the forces of war and the sea. In the depths of the Atlantic, two legends rest, foes in life, united in eternity.